Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We are glad you are here. This is Bonfire in a Box, how to ignite and grow your brand with thought leadership. We are so glad you're here. If you're joining us live and in person, welcome. Make use of that question interface while you're here, and we will do Q&A at the end. And for those on the recording, you count too. Sorry you can't join the live Q&A, but if you have any questions, shoot us an email. Myself, Casey at ringmaster.com. Also, Ryan, rootstock.agency, or Tara, rootstock.agency. And with that, on with the show. Ryan, take it away, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. It's great to be here. And that begs the question, why are you here, folks that are watching this? Well, you are a subject matter expert looking to make that jump to being a true thought leader, making stronger connections with bigger and better audiences in a way that not only grows your brand, but improves your field for everyone's benefit. You have that spark that you want to use to ignite your growth. Well, what is that spark? It's your best thinking, the combination of your unique skills, knowledge, values, personal experience, and perspective. What stopped you from turning this spark into a real fire isn't a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of clarity on your ideas and not being able to articulate either it or your ultimate vision as a whole. As a result, your marketing efforts have stalled and other business requirements are absorbing the most energy. We see it all the time. Brand growth has maybe stagnated or is even in danger of becoming extinguished. What you need now is to lay some important strategic storytelling groundwork that will not only get your fire truly burning, but warming and delighting both yourself and others as long as you want. We're here today to help you learn both why and how.
Awesome. Well, let's introduce who's talking here today. Happy to introduce myself, Casey Cheshire, founder and chief evangelist at Ringmaster. And we're going to talk more about why we're all here today. But we have teamed up with the group over at Rootstock, who are amazing at helping you figure out your own thought leadership and squeeze it into brand. And they are a brand growth consulting firm.
Exactly. Thank you, Casey. Yes, we are a thought leadership and brand growth firm that focuses on thought leadership. Imagine that. So we help thought leaders learn how to define their thought leadership position so they can use that to shape strategic content initiatives such as a podcast. And before I go on, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce Tara McVoy, our project director and strategist at Rootstock. Hi, Tara.
Hi.
My
Glad to be
here. Yes. Awesome. And so with this thought leadership work, we help leaders expand beyond their networks, multiply their revenue, write and publish best-selling books, land paid and unpaid speaking engagements, increase your valuation, secure venture capital investments, there we go, and start and nurture important conversations in their fields, whether that's in person or on a podcast.
Hey, podcast. Someone said podcast. What's going on? So Ringmaster, we love creating podcasts, and really it's where thought leaders go when it's time to get the word out and launch the podcast. We work with entrepreneurs and SaaS enterprises to really leverage the podcast for one thing: growth, brand growth, revenue growth, all the growths, all under one category, D, all the above. Many of our clients are New York Times, Amazon, even Forbes best-selling authors with millions and millions of downloads, and we are happy to be here. So what happens? Well, I got to tell you a story. Just the other day, we had a heat wave here, a winter heat wave here in New Hampshire. And what that means for us is basically it was in the 40s. We didn't have to wear 9 layers. We only had to wear 5. But, for me, I said, hey, this is a perfect time to just kind of get outside, get out of the house and, grab a beer, maybe a cigar, and light a fire in the backyard. We got this great fire ring back there with some chairs around it. And, I didn't gather up all the twigs, using my Boy Scout training. I just thought I'd get a couple and throw them down with a few leaves and light that puppy up. And as you can imagine, it lit for a little bit, but then it went out. And I did that maybe one more time and thought, oh my goodness, okay, I'm not gathering all the things I need here. So I went and got a little fire starter. I also got a much bigger collection of the littlest twigs and a little bit bigger twigs, came back and lit that thing, and it stayed on till the night. But this is the kind of thing we're trying to avoid. Oftentimes, and this is why we're partnering up, oftentimes we work with entrepreneurs who are ready to start their podcast, only they're not sure what they want to talk about. Maybe they just sold their company and they're doing their new passion project, and they haven't quite clarified who it is they want to talk to or what it is they really want to say on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So this can really delay the launch of your podcast because you're not quite sure what you really want to do yet. And so it was an amazing conversation with Ryan and Tara over at the Rootstock team that said, hey, why don't we do a webinar together? Because I need your help to help the people that we work with to launch podcasts. And really everyone needs to watch out for the risks. Like me with my winter fire, if you haven't prepared, that beautiful spark of your idea can go out, right? This could happen due to burnout, just personal burnout, because you forget maybe how much grind there is at the beginning. Lack of client retention because you're still figuring things out. Maybe the pipeline is diminishing. You haven't quite found product market fit. All these things tie back to maybe you're not sure where to plant that flag. What is that North Star you're really chasing after? You want to tell your team to chase after, and you want to speak and you want to make content for. So a little bit of preparation can go a long way, like with the fire and like everywhere else. And we, of course, don't need to waste time and money and do all these things if you don't have that groundwork built. That's why we're here. And look, I'm a fellow entrepreneur, and I know we love to just start things. And in many cases, that's fine. But man, if you just gather a little bit more of the twigs and the bundles, and we get some of the questions answered to prepare us as thought leaders, it can go so much more successful. And again, that fire can stay lit on into the nighttime, past dinner time.
Exactly.
I love that. And one word I've heard you use a lot, Casey, is pod fade, which is one of my new favorite combo words. Because you're right. You're totally right. It just takes, it gives you that edge of longevity and sustainability when you take this time to do it right, or you risk just kind of spinning your wheels constantly, coming back, doing it again, et cetera.
Well, and it helps you pass the fire on to someone else. Like if you need to delegate, there's someone else who can help and take over for you because they know exactly what they need to be doing and saying.
Love that. No, great, Bill. Yeah. Arm your team with what they need to talk about you, talk about your company. That could be your marketing folks, your sales folks, your business development folks, et cetera. But to get to that point, you've got to prepare the ground. Just like when Casey you're struggling with the fire, and I did that recently. The ground was a little wet. My chimney had a little wet bottom. Like, it'll be fine. I shoved some newly cut pieces of branch in there that were still drying, and I'm getting frustrated because it's not lighting. And finally I did what you did. And I'm like, let me just take a breath, step back, get what I really need to get for this. And then within 5 minutes, I had a nice roaring, nice warm fire here in Atlanta. So it reminded me, you've got to prepare the ground. So just like I had a wet chimenea, it was probably on the best spot to build that fire that night. You can't just light your fire anywhere. You've got to prepare the ground, fire pit, chimenea, whatever. When it comes to your story, your thinking, your ideas, it's important to invest similar time to plan and strategize up front. This is crucial for sustained success. To us at Rootstock, we believe that before you can authentically connect with others to grow your brand, you need epic clarity on 4 things. What I know, what I believe, what my vision is, and how do I articulate it efficiently and effectively. Now, what I know could mean a lot of things, but in this case, it means your areas of expertise, like what makes you smart and special, what are your big skills. What I believe, again, can mean a lot of things, and Tara will tell us more about this later, but what I believe here is your mission and your values, kindness, empathy, efficiency, creativity, etc. What makes you, you? What are your North Stars, like Casey said? Who influences you and why? Those all speak to your core messaging. Vision, your vision, how you want to make things better for your field. What is being done well that could be amplified? What's missing? How can you, the leader, fill this in? And this is another one of the many critical parts for that transition from subject matter expert to thought leader.
Yeah.
Then we take all that stuff, which is very important, and we get you through it in a few different ways that we can touch on later. Then we help you articulate it Because if you don't know how to say all that succinctly and clearly and concisely, again, it's not really getting you that full value it could. So this is where Rootstock really comes in and really listens to you as you work through all three. And then we help you start to think about how you might tell it to others. We have a little TED Talk example we'll give you later. But then we work with you, we condense it for you, and we deliver this thought leadership position to you. Now, to dive a little bit deeper, I want to let Tara kind of take it from here.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, as we mentioned, you're going to start with what you know, right? And what you know, there's like a lot of things that you know, right? Maybe you know the name of your favorite teacher when you were in elementary school. You know your birthday. You know your favorite teams. All those kind of stuff. There's a wealth of knowledge that we all have, right? But when it comes to your thought leadership position, what we focus on during these workshops and exercises that we do, either in a multi-day retreat or in a one-day intensive that you can take, where we do a bunch of different exercises to drill down in what you know, which is, as Ryan has mentioned, we help you work through these exercises and identify, like, what do I know that maybe nobody else does? Or what do I know that I'm really, 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 really good at, and work on a hierarchy of, like, I really, really know this. I want to know this. I kind of don't know this, so that you can look at your hierarchy of expertise and what makes you unique and what makes you special. This is going to be your differentiator. That's going to take you from sort of chocolate ice cream to like double chocolate chunk with like a layer of white chocolate over the top. It's going to really make you special and stand out. And another question too is, like, where did this knowledge come from? How did you get it? Let's look at that, because there may be some things in doing that exercise that will inform how you're going to share this knowledge later. That's know. And related to that, what you believe is very important. These two things really are what makes you you. It takes your knowledge and it makes it even it's not just a fancy chocolate sundae. It's like a really big, special, something great that people are really going to want to dig into, and then maybe also share with other people. What you believe is not just important to Ted Lasso. It is really important to your thought leadership. So we do another series of exercises that help you identify what are my top like 3 to 5 values. What has inspired you to get here? Who are the people that you look up to? Like, I really believe in fill in the blank person. I admire them. That will continue to inform your thought leadership and how you want to share it. What things have guided me in my life, because then that's going to apply to your business as well, and hopefully to the rest of your field. One of the things that we think is really important in thought leadership, that it isn't just about you and I'm so important. It's about you and how you want to take what you know, what you believe, your vision, and elevate other people in your field at the same time. And so digging into your beliefs really does help that. And we pull those things together after a series of activities, and we start looking at where are there some parallels in what you know and what you believe. Where have there been some disconnects? Like, you thought that this was really your key message. You're like, I know this, but when you work with it with a belief, like, maybe it doesn't quite jive. Just to refine and refine and refine those two things, so that we can get some real powerful clarity.
Exactly. Looking for those through lines, right? Those threads that are going to help tie that story together. Beautiful. And then from there, we follow that up with what is your vision, And so here as you can see here, we ask people to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Preferably in the woods. If we're near the woods, if we do a retreat, we'll usually be somewhere where there's plenty of green spaces and forests and such, but we'll find a spot where you can do it anyway, because we need people. They need to have this space to ruminate on all of this in their own way. No phones. We give them just a notepad and a pen. We'll lock your phone up if we have to, if you're one of those people. And we ask people to take a walk and think about things like how you want to make things better for your field. What's being done well that could be amplified? What's missing? And how can you fill this in? These are key things to that vision. And then diving a bit deeper, we further ask them to explore questions like, what difficult changes lie ahead? What transformative opportunities? How should your field be evolving? What's possible for it? If things shift in the way that you think they should, how will your field change, and how will the world be better because of it? How will it or you make the world better? Like, what is your MLK dream for the field you're in? Is kind of what we're getting at with the vision part, And then we use these thoughts to start crystallizing your vision statement in combination with the know and believe results into the draft of your thought leadership position. So at this point, we're getting close. It's like, here's my vision. Here's why I'm qualified to make it happen. And here's how I can manifest that. And that's great. That's really powerful stuff. But now the key part is this next part, the articulation. How do I articulate it? Just like, how do I fly with something that doesn't have a cover on it, like this fella here? It's working. So we'll make it work for you. So how do we help you articulate that? Well, we call it TED time. And this is where we start to tie those first three things together, where your position really starts to take shape. And we get you just thinking in a way of like, okay, because TED Talks are very great. They're great stories. We know you're not going to write a TED Talk in a couple of hours. That's not the purpose of this. Maybe not even a couple of days. It's going to take you a while. That's why they have TED coaches that work with people for like months. But starting to think about how you might shape one can get you closer to the articulation of your thought leadership position. So together, we look at some TED Talk examples. There's a bunch of great ones out there, of course. Everyone's got their favorite, but we'll pull up a few of our own. And then we discuss the strengths of each. Emphasize the importance of beginning, middle, and end when it comes to telling a story, and get you thinking about the outline. One reason we love TED Talks and why they're so successful is because at their essence, it's a simple story structure. It's a beautifully told story, but it's crafted in a way we all learn in like third grade phonics, And so we kind of go back to that. But it's hard to do that. So we help you get there. So, what should you start with? Like, what's the resounding, inspiring conclusion? And what points do you need to hit in the middle to get your listeners there? Then we guide you through another writing exercise, which is a TED Talk draft. The key part here, though, is not only are we crafting it, we ask you to share it. Because saying it out loud is important, because it no longer can things hide. One of my favorite sayings here, Arnhem Street, clear writing gives bad thinking nowhere to hide. And so that's why we do that.
That's so when you read it and share it with others, you can kind of hear where you might need to make some tweaks and changes.
Exactly.
And it's fun. And
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It sounds like it's a lot, but it's a lot of fun. And people truly enjoy the process.
Yeah. So once you've gone through all of that, now, believe it or not, once your thought leadership position is in place, once we've helped you boil all that together and delivered you your document that's got your thought leadership position, which is the concentration of all of these efforts, you actually are ready to start working on a podcast. It might feel like that's kind of a big lift, but it really is the fuel that's going to ultimately create a warm foundation for you to then start piling on even bigger logs, like your book, which Casey will talk about, or awards, big national awards, editorials in bigger magazines. So it's a good those are the podcasts are the right small sticks, as Casey was talking about, to put together. And having a firm grasp on what you know, what you believe, and what you envision and how to articulate is going to help you build that podcast. It'll help you think about, who do you want to interview? What's the style of your content? What are the topics? I mean, you've got what you know, you've got what you believe. You should be able to map out a series of podcast topics very quickly from there. It'll help tell you how often your values will, knowing your values will help you figure out, like, how often can I really do this? Like, what's really important for me? Is it important to have one really long one, or is it a bunch of fast ones? That'll help shape that. And then also the style. that'll help you when we think about who you admire. Like you might be able to look into, well, what are they doing for their podcast, or what does their content look like? So all of these exercises really put you in a really good place to start your thought leadership journey with the podcast, especially because in this format, you don't have to have all of the answers. Often podcasts involve interviews and Q&A, and that'll allow other people to share their expertise and help them feel like thought leaders. And also then you still have some time to shape out your manifesto, that you might want to publish later. And so once that podcast is burning well because of all this work, that is then going to help light up even bigger projects. It's going to keep those coals burning, keep things warm. And also, as you're creating it, it might even ignite some new ideas. So this is a really good place for your fire to be at this point in your journey.
I love that point you made around not needing to know all the answers when it comes to podcasting. Asking people the questions is what it's all about, right? So I love that it's like we put this foundation down and then we start having conversations with the right people, and you solidify yourself so well when you do that. One of the things that when it's time to put the fuel on the fire and really start making these things burn, you have this magic thing. And I know we've talked a little bit about podcasts already. It's like a Swiss Army knife of marketing and promotion and brand explosion. When you want to really get things out there, this little thing, having little interviews with people, goes across the entire board. We've heard already the idea of just, chatting with people and learning and getting inspired from them. I've also seen personally where I did an interview with someone who was a thought leader in my space. And accidentally, I found out at the end of the podcast that they were moving on to the exact software platform that my team specialized in. So that turned into, let's get our teams together. And we scoped out what turned into an $80,000 deal. And there was no sales cycle because we were friends now. We had made a relationship on the podcast. So there is that direct tie into revenue that's possible. But then there's also some great content. When it came time to write my book, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, I actually had people who were willing to put their names on the front of it and the back of it and sign that it was a great book and all these kind of things, because my network had expanded by just interviewing these people and these people and these people. And you're able to pick and choose. That's the magic of it. When it's your show, it's your show. Who do you want to talk to? And so I was able to pick and choose different people that would really help me out. So you'll find that this thing, it helps with brand, it helps with revenue, it helps with leads, or it helps with content, all the different things. And really, you're just going to have all the logs stacked next to your fire, so you're really able to start burning it up. On the social side, it's huge. So normally it can be kind of a pain, right? I remember going on LinkedIn and spending hours writing a pithy blog post about something really cool and finding a great image for it and put it out there. And what happens? Sometimes it's 1,200 people that read it and are like, this is great. And sometimes it's 12 and you don't really know why and when. Maybe if I'd done the research and maybe I answered some of the questions here, I would have had more success. But man, it can be so time consuming. Well, your social game completely turns around with a podcast, because why? You want to let people know that your show is coming out. So every week, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll see I'm like, hey, I talked to this person last week. They're amazing. Go learn from them. Here's what I learned. This. People are like, wow. And there's a promo video of them being brilliant. People are clicking on that promo video. They're watching the promo sometimes more than the pod itself. And there's just thousands and thousands of impressions that are happening across the board just by sharing and really promoting somebody else, promoting them on your show, of course, but promoting them. And then they take that and they reshare it, and your guest reshares it with their friends who reshare it. Suddenly you are the centerpiece of social and you didn't even realize it. And we alluded to this earlier, the idea of this big content's coming. Well, one of the things that I did is I wanted to write a book, but I had some gaps in my knowledge. So I set out across a year's time and I made a theme for each month. Each month had a particular topic that I wanted to learn more about or wanted to solidify for the book, or just made sense to just round out my knowledge. And I invited a guest each week that was an absolute wizard in that topic, knew 10 times as much as I did. They were like a subject matter deep expert to be a guest on my show. And I interviewed the crap out of them. I asked them so many questions. And these aren't just your scripted questions. These are questions you want to know as a thought leader that can help make your own thought content even more valuable. So I'd ask them all these questions. And after a month was done, I took the lessons learned from those 4 interviews, hour-long interviews, sometimes hour and a half. And I boiled it down into what I learned, what I knew already, what I learned, and what I wanted everyone else to know about it, into an hour-long webinar like this one. And then across 12 months, I ended up having these 12 really juicy, dense webinars full of content. And those turned into the chapters in my book. Transcribed them, and that was a great starting point. There's still a little work after that. It is a heavy lift doing a book, but man, was I off to the races by simply having interviews with people and learning and then sharing my knowledge. So the big stuff is right around the corner. And finally, before we get to the real blaze, your guests are your gasoline. Your guests are your gasoline. And I mentioned this earlier, that you share an episode about them. If they had a good time, guess what? They're sharing it too. We've had thousands more, tens of thousands more impressions happen because your guests are super proud of themselves. They had a great experience and like, check this out, check this out, check this out. I've had over 300, 400 now podcast episodes. And if you were to ask me, who is your most popular episode? Not personally your favorite, but who has the most downloads? Maybe it's one of those famous book authors you interviewed, one of those other people that are speaking on stage. No, it is a VP of sales in a company down in Texas who I interviewed on my podcast. It's a marketing podcast, but hey, come on over, sales. Teach us what we need to know about sales, as marketers. And he came over and he just crushed it. And when he heard his episode, he felt so well represented that he decided anyone who wanted to buy from his company, he would send them a link to that episode so they could listen or they could watch his interview, because he talked about how he wants to serve his customers and make them successful. And he did a really good job. But now he sends that to every single prospect, every single customer, every single partner in his entire network. This thing, as you can imagine, we created marketing content for him with this episode, and he's using it everywhere. It's social proof. It's all the recipes that he needs. And he's promoted that thing more than I could possibly promote my own podcast. It is absolutely blown away. It's embarrassing how high the stats are compared to some other people, because he's just so proud of it. And that's what we want to do. That's where the guests become gasoline, because they will share it more than you can possibly imagine.
Yep.
Oh, I love that story so much.
All right. And so now our brand is on fire, and I wanted to share a few examples. There's some great podcasts here that you should check out. Dan and his Defining Hospitality, Entrepreneur Intel, the Revenue Driven CMO, and then there's my show, the Hardcore Marketing Show. These are some thought leaders that have just been kicking serious butt in their industries and doing exactly like we've described. So don't take my word for it. Go out, seek out these people. And I'm happy to introduce you to folks like this as well. But let me tell you what it looks like. A little bit of visioning for you for when you put the work in, when you answer those questions initially, you lay down the framework, you get that ground prepared. What does all this look like when things really catch on fire and you're just burning, logs and all sorts of things are happening and your guests are gasoline? What does it look like? Well, first of all, your vision for your company is on fire as well and is very clear. I had a challenge as a CEO with my last company. I got so obfuscated. I got so good at making a self-managing company that it was managing itself, and they didn't really need me for anything. So I wasn't on the sales calls anymore. There was a sales manager and there was a salesperson. So I wasn't on those. I wasn't really on the operation calls anymore because there are people and people as people for those. Even finance, you name it. We had good teams everywhere. Well, the problem was I'm supposed to be setting a vision, planting a flag for where this company needs to go, but I was less and less connected to the customer. I didn't really know where they wanted to go. And so I started making crazy crazy things. I don't know if you've ever made a crazy rock in your quarterly planning meeting, but I was making crazy things because I was not connected to my customers. I even sometimes didn't have anything, and then my team would make up stuff, and that didn't always work out so well either. So when I started a podcast, I didn't know that this would happen, but I interviewed future customers as well as existing customers on the podcast, and I would ask them, good questions, good strategy questions, but also what keeps you up at night?
Mm-hmm.
What are your challenges? What are the things that you're really laser focused on right now? And on the side, tell me more about what you're trying to solve with the stuff that my team is even helping you out with. Wow. Now I know. And you hear about Jeff Bezos having a seat at the table for the customer. Well, I felt that same kind of energy at my company where I remember, oh yeah, that question. Yeah, I just talked to Alice. She's fantastic. Here's the challenge she's going through. I became the voice of the customer at my own company again, because I was interviewing our customers and our prospects. And I knew where to take the company. I knew what everyone's pattern was, the challenges they were facing. I was able to plant a flag, say, no, we're going to this thing because this is what all these people need that I've just got off the phone with.
Yeah.
Your network explodes. I look at my LinkedIn network. I'm like, oh my gosh, who are all these people? People all want to connect, and they want to connect with your guests, and it expands and explodes. And of course, with that, your sales pipeline starts to just expand, and not just for yourself, but your teams starts being connected with other folks, and your inbound just blows up. But one of the most fun things that happened related to this in your network is when I attended a conference in Boston, just down the street. I didn't actually have a pass for it. Don't tell the event people, but I was invited to a couple of the after parties. One happened to be on a boat, which is, I'm not going to say no to that. So a boat in the Boston Harbor, let's go. And so I strolled into the event conference area, and I was walking through the hallway to eventually get outside, and I was going through the conference a little bit, and a couple speakers had finished in their breakout rooms. And sure enough, I knew them. I had interviewed them on the podcast. And they were like, hey, Casey, how are you? Great to see you. We caught up. And then there's a few other people that say, hey, you're the guy with a podcast, right? Yeah, I listened to your show. It's great. And I tell you, you have to keep yourself in check here, but you have all these people that are like, it's just because you're the connector, and you're also the one giving the time and attention, and it's your platform as a podcast. So you become the center stage, and you're able to put the spotlight on all sorts of really good experts and pros in your area. Finally, don't burn books, create them. I told the story about the book earlier, and I got to tell you what, once you have one out there, you have two. And I have had so many deals close because people said, well, you know what? You've got a book. You spent the time to figure out this framework. You spent the time to map it all out. And damn, that's kind of impressive. You have 75 reviews on Amazon. Let's go. I would like to work with you. And so all this additional social proof and an additional collateral was only possible because we had thought about who we were. I thought about who I was, what kind of thought leadership I wanted. And then it was like go time with that podcast.
Oh, I love that. There's so much good stuff in there. And next time you get invited on a boat in Boston, just let us know.
You're in, man.
We'll come
totally
up.
Totally got you.
No, I love that because you touched on so many things, Casey, that are pillars for us at Rootstock and what thought leadership can impact. It's a Venn diagram, clearly, but it may as well be a flywheel. Because so you have your thought leadership position. A lot of things you just said impact this. And I just want to unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
Now that you've got your thought leadership position nailed down, you're using it for the podcast. Well, I'm pointing like you can see what I'm pointing at over here, people. You're hitting these three key areas of growth that we focus on at Rootstock to build a strategic content ecosystem around that thought leadership position. This is when we get kind of more in like the more traditional tactical marketing and messaging stuff that people kind of know more about. Strategy and story, conversations and content, connections and clout. This podcast by itself hits all of these, right? Your strategy and your story, strategy is that thought leadership position. What is the podcast about? What stories do I want to tell through this podcast? Conversations, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but not only on the podcast, Everything Casey just talked about, meeting people at the conference, having those conversations. When this person's now sharing it on their social platforms, that's leading to online conversations and things like that. So you get a ton of that. Obviously, you're producing a load of content, and not just the podcast. You take an episode, you make it a social media post, you chop it up into multiple segments. Maybe it's a chapter in a book, like Casey mentioned. Maybe it becomes a topic for your next editorial in your highly read niche industry publication, type things like that. Then you get into connections and clout. Again, just by interviewing, asking people to come on your show, you're creating that connection. And then when the show's done and everyone's sharing it, you're creating more connections. And all of this adds up to building your clout and the clout of your listeners. And as a thought leader, clout is a very big thing, because that just proves that, hey, you kind of know what you're talking about. You're good at your business, of course, but you're really raising your entire field, and you're getting that clout that comes with that. So when you're walking through a conference and people are like, "Are you the podcast guy? Is that Casey over there?" Like, those things can happen, and it can happen online on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever you like to go. So the podcast is great because it hits all three of these areas, and then from here you create this entire bigger ecosystem that we've kind of already talked about. The social media post, maybe you write a blog topic about something, the editorial chapter in a book, a talk track for a conference. So maybe instead of walking through and being the rock star, just walking through the conference halls, you're on stage next time.
Yeah.
And your talk track comes from your podcast. You did an episode, maybe the VP of sales, there's something in there. It's like, that would make a killer talk track. I'm going to pitch that to the sales focused conference over in Texas or California or whatever. So you're creating all these great things. And then if those folks get on a podcast, they might want you on theirs, or someone not even associated with it heard it. They have a podcast or they're writing a book and they're like, "Hey, Casey, can you come on my podcast? I want to unpack this one thing you talked about a bit more." So you're creating all these great things, and just round and round it goes, and it's a very powerful thing. So that elevated level of all this content and the engagement is hitting all these things, your clout, your connections, more conversations, more content, all based on that strategy and the story we took that time to build upfront. It just keeps building and growing from there. And it truly becomes so powerful if you just take some time up front to just do that key strategic foundational messaging work.
I love the overlap of that diagram. And it speaks to the efficiency, right?
Right.
Stop trying to do everything separately and have it take 100% of the time it takes, right? With that overlap, man, the efficiency of just doing one thing, and then you can repurpose and yeah, I love that. It's a great diagram.
Awesome. Thank you. I didn't draw it.
I saw you drew it.
So Casey, if somebody does want to make a podcast and they're so inspired, how do they?
Yeah. It's like you're probably inspired to get one created. We have a program that launches one, but I just wanted to just describe the kind of things you need to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to go do it on your own, fantastic. Launch a podcast. Do that. You really should do that. Answer those questions first, though, but then launch that podcast. So the first thing you want to think about is the name. And depending on your goal for the podcast, and the goals that we typically recommend is you really make it all about your guest, because that's where magic really comes from. That's where that guest is the gasoline, right? So you make it about your guest. And if that's the kind of podcast you're launching, then the number one goal of the name is to get the guest to come on the show. So I highly recommend, it's usually 2 words or phrases together. One of those words is a hyper-focused word around the kind of people you're going to be interviewing, the industry they're in, the role that they're in. Is this a CTO podcast, a B2B CTO podcast? Is this a B2C CMO marketers delight podcast, right? Is it that kind? And then the second area is some kind of positive word that makes it sound like whoever the guest is an absolute rock star. So it might even be called that. Might even be like B2C CMO rock stars, right? Something that says, this is who it is all about, who should listen. And man, these people are rock stars. Or leadership is a great one, but some kind of complementary leaders in data, right? And in combining those things together, really gets you a name that both speaks to what's going on, but then also makes it very clear that you're talking to great people. And then you will have no issues getting people on a podcast. People say no to a sales call all the time, but people almost always say yes to a podcast invite because it's an honor. And so you want to make that name something that can really reflect on them. And that guest strategy, a lot of what's been talked about today, who do you want to talk to? Who are the people that maybe can buy from you or introduce you to other people? They might be great partners. And for sure, start with people you know. Don't start right off the bat with some scary pro who's going to try to eat your lunch, right? Start with some friends. People get on a podcast. You're not even quite sure what it's all about yet, right? So get some good guests on there that will just join you and get you a chance to really unwind. You'll want to create a brand for your podcast too. And this ties back again to answering those questions at the beginning around your mission. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the same brand as your company. It might be a totally separate brand. It gives it that independent feel to it, but it's sponsored by your company. So that's what we recommend there. And then the final thing I'll just skip to is gear. What kind of gear do you need? Well, there's a whole list and we can link you to a blog post about it, but I highly recommend you get a microphone. Audio is the most important thing you can do on a podcast. And these microphones right here, they are called ATR 2100. Go get it. Go get it on Amazon. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. Plugs right into your laptop. So those are my tips on launching your podcast.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Well, if you have more questions, I'm not seeing any that have come in. But if questions about any of this come up, like reiterating how developing these questions helps your podcast, wanting to know more specifics about podcast creation from Casey, if you want to know more about the other types of thought leadership content that Rootstock can help you with, if you want to sign up for an intensive to go through your thought leadership position, we would love to hear from you. Even if you think you just have one little tiny scrap of a maybe idea, share it with us. That's the beginning of your spark. And we can help you figure out how to build and grow it. We all can. Casey, Brian, me, we're excited to help you grow a fire. So I think since I'm not seeing any cues for our Q&A yet, I just want to say thank you guys. And thank you guys for watching and listening. And we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here and listening, and looking forward to talking to everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's go build a fire.